Hi everybody, Jeremy here. Welcome back to the channel. Chances are if you live in Australia, you've heard of Scott Pape, the self-professed barefoot investor. Scott has almost single-handedly created a financial movement in Australia with his best-selling book, The Barefoot Investor, The Only Money Guide You'll Ever Need. Because of Scott's book, there are many barefoot disciples that swear by his principles. Phrases like fire extinguisher, mojo and buckets have all become commonplace within Australian households, with his army of disciples wielding orange bank cards. In today's video, we're going to be talking about Scott's book, The Barefoot Investor, The Only Money Guide You'll Ever Need, and whether or not it's any good. But in short, yes, I do think it's a good book and it's certainly worth reading. But it's important to also highlight the book is not perfect. So in today's video, I'm going to go over the 9 barefoot steps, what they each involve, and the pros and cons I think there are of using the barefoot method. But firstly, the book is broken out into 9 key barefoot steps. And these are the steps Scott outlines that you need to follow in order to achieve financial success. Now Scott breaks these 9 barefoot steps into 3 sections, each with 3 steps each, called plant, grow, and harvest. Step 1 in the book is to schedule your monthly barefoot date night. Now the concept of financial date night is to set a single day aside with you and your partner, or if it's just you, just yourself, to sit down and review and go over your finances. It's a single day of the month where you sit down and do your budgeting, talk about what's going well, what's going wrong, and how things could be better. Step number 2, set up your buckets. Now this is the cornerstone of the barefoot strategy, is Scott's bucket system. And this was his way of setting up a simplistic way of managing his finances with his partner. Now the barefoot system consists of putting your income into 3 separate buckets: grow, mojo, and blow. And each of the buckets has a specific purpose. Your grow bucket is for growing your long-term wealth. Your mojo bucket is your emergency savings fund. And your blow bucket is all the money that you're going to be spending. Scott then breaks down the blow bucket even further, suggesting that you allocate 10% of your income to splurge, which is essentially allowing you to spend that money on anything that you want. A further 10% is then allocated to smile. Now this is meant to be for saving towards those larger items that make you smile. Holidays, cars, big ticket items. A further 20% is allocated to the extinguisher fund. And depending on where you are in the barefoot steps, this extinguisher fund is used to put out financial fires. And lastly, the remaining 60% is meant to go towards your day-to-day living expenses, your rent, your food, your power bills, things like that. Overall, the bucket system is really simple to use, and I think that is the large appeal that the barefoot system has and why it has such a following in Australia. Step 3, domino your debts. As Scott puts it in his book, it's very difficult to be financially successful whilst you have a high amount of debt. So step 3 is getting rid of all your debt, or as Scott puts it, dominoing your debts. Scott suggests that you list all your debts smallest to largest. You then pay off the smallest debt aggressively whilst paying minimum on all the rest. And then slowly but surely you start to pay off the debts one by one, dominoing your debts and gaining financial momentum. Once you've paid off all your debts, you've completed section 1. You're now on to section 2, grow. Step 4, buy your own home. I think this is an interesting step because depending on where you are in life, sometimes buying a home isn't the best decision for you. But as Scott puts it, over the long term, there are some serious advantages to owning your own home, but not just financially, particularly emotionally. And a key concept of the barefoot system is it's not purely about numbers. It takes into account the emotional component of life, which I think is a really important thing. But generally over a lifetime, most people do want to own a home. And that's why Scott suggests buying a home, but not just buying a home, buying the right kind of home. And probably the most interesting point Scott raises is the factor of what he calls postcode povos, which is essentially people that take on an enormous amount of debt just to live in a suburb they think is a little bit more trendy. And Scott really touches on how a home should be something you look forward to and not a noose that's tied around your neck. And in the case of postcode povos, just because you can afford a really big mortgage now doesn't mean you necessarily will be able to in the future. A typical mortgage is 30 years, and you and your partner, for instance, may want to start a family. That may mean that one of you goes to part-time work, maybe someone loses their job along the way or gets sick. And this can place enormous pressure on people in relationships. When you hit those uncertain times, you're under mortgage stress, and ultimately that means that at the very least you're not enjoying the home you're living in. Step 5, increase your super to 15%. For most people, the employer contribution of 9.5% is simply not going to be enough to get them through a comfortable retirement. As such, Scott suggests that as soon as you've bought your home, you increase your superannuation contributions to 15% of your take-home income. Now, personally, I think leveraging your superannuation to its maximum is a really good financial strategy, so I think this tip from Scott is actually really, really good. Most people don't start thinking about their superannuation until it's too late. The sooner you can start thinking about it and increase your contributions, the more comfortable your retirement's going to be. Step 6, boost your mojo to 3 months. The core concept of the Mojo account is for you to have an emergency fund, so when life happens, you have a pile of cash that you can fall back on. Now, initially, Scott suggests that you save an emergency fund of at least $2,000. And regardless of your level of debt, you keep that $2,000 locked in an account just in case an emergency comes up. Step number 6 is to boost that Mojo account even further to the equivalent of 3 months worth of living expenses. And again, I think this is a really good step. The majority of people don't have an adequate emergency fund, and the power of having a really strong emergency fund is when life does happen and things go wrong, things that could have financially ruined you and caused a lot of stress now just become minor inconveniences. So I think this is a really, really good thing for people to be doing. This brings us on to the last section, harvest, and step 7, get the banker off your back. Now, as Scott puts it, a lot of the hard work is now done, and the key concept of this step is to use all of your spare cash to start paying off your mortgage sooner. As Scott listed in his book, one of his greatest achievements in life was paying off his dream home. Now, this step is really straightforward. It's about using all of your spare cash to pay down the balance of your mortgage so you can own your home outright. And the key part of this concept is Scott talks about the emotional stability that you have when you own the home you're in. And again, I think this is a really good thing as well. We can talk about the pros and cons of using debt to increase wealth, but generally speaking, it's never a bad thing to be paying down debt. And owning your own home, I think, is something that everyone should do at some stage in their life. This brings us to step 8, nail your retirement number. Now that you've paid down all your debts and you own your home outright, it's time to start turbocharging your retirement. This means throwing all your spare cash into investments to nail your retirement number. And how big your retirement number is really depends on what kind of lifestyle you want to have in retirement. For some people, they're happy to have a very modest retirement, a very comfortable. And this is Smoggy, everybody. Now, for instance, some people may be very happy with a very modest retirement. They don't want to take lavish holidays every year and are comfortable living on, $40,000 to $60,000 a year. Other people, for instance, may want a more lavish retirement, are willing to work longer and invest more in order to have more money available to them when they retire. And again, this is another good step. Thinking about retirement is always a smart thing to do, and making sure that you have enough money in your accounts to retire in the lifestyle that you want to. And this brings us to the final barefoot step. Step 9, leave a legacy. Now, I think this is probably the most interesting of the barefoot steps. Scott really goes out of his way to highlight that once you've achieved the previous 8 goals, essentially you're now financially set for life. However, it's now time to turn and look at what legacy you can leave and the good that you can do in the world. And I think this is a really important step because people often talk about money being evil, but in reality, all money does is provide opportunities to do things, and money can do a world of good when pointed in the right direction. So here are my key pros of the book. The Barefoot Investor is by no means written like a typical financial book. Now, unless you're really into finance, most finance books are incredibly boring. But that's where The Barefoot Investor really differs. Scott goes out of his way to make an engaging read. He deliberately uses funny stories and easy to follow examples to drive home his points. And this really resonates with the reader, and I again think it really sort of drills into why the barefoot culture is so strong. But the key strength, I think, of The Barefoot Investor is it's simple and easy to understand. If you had no idea how to manage money or had just a really poor financial education, the Barefoot system could be a one-stop shop to helping you start down the process of managing money more effectively. The key cons of the book is the book is very generalized. It's a one set of rules to suit all scenarios. And as such, some of the rules of thumb for some people just won't work all that well. it also isn't the most optimal way to manage your money. For instance, there are ways that get you out of debt faster or ways that you can increase your wealth faster than using the barefoot steps. But as I said earlier, this book isn't just so much about finance, it's also about the emotional decisions that come with managing money. The book is definitely targeted at people that really haven't had a huge amount of financial education. If you're already budgeting or already pretty good at managing money, whilst I would probably still encourage you to read the book, you're probably not going to get that much out of it compared to someone who is a relatively financial novice. My last con, I guess, isn't directly covered by the book, but it's the ensuing culture that's been created because of the hysteria around the barefoot method. And I'm not having a swipe at Scott here. I think the barefoot investor system has helped hundreds of thousands of people. And it's really easy to find evidence of this. Have a look at the various Facebook groups and online forum posts from the die-hard barefoot disciples, and you can see that it really has changed a lot of people's lives for the better. And that's obviously a really good thing. However, by the same token, this obsession with the barefoot system leads a lot of people to think that it is the only way that money should be managed. How managing money works best for you differs person to person. And while some people will certainly find the barefoot strategy the best way to manage money for themselves, it may not be the best way for everybody. And it's important to remember that you can be financially successful managing your money in different ways. Overall, however, I think The Barefoot Investor is a great read. And for retailing for less than $20 in most stores, you're not going to be that much out of pocket if you don't enjoy it. However, as I said, it's by no means the best system for everybody. For me personally, whilst I don't follow all of the barefoot principles, I found reading the book a really great catalyst for taking an interest and greater responsibility in the financial aspect of my life. And as a starting point for your financial journey, I do recommend this book. In fact, I've given it to a lot of friends and family over the years when they've started to pique an interest in their personal finances. Alright guys, that's it for today. I really appreciate you watching the video. Let me know down below what you think of The Barefoot Investor and if you found it helpful in your financial journey. If you haven't liked the video already, I'd really appreciate it. It really helps out the channel. Alright guys, that's it for today. Thanks again for joining me, and I'll see you in the next video.